Welcome to Wellness Today. I'm your host, Tracey Gonzalez. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the greater Danbury area, and I am so glad to be with you today. Hope your day is going well. Today we are going to continue on the topic of parenting. Actually, today we're going to talk about the parent-child relationship. And this has everything to do with wellness. There are times when we kind of like are on a roll, everything's balanced, everything's going fine. Then all of a sudden we hit a speed bump and we're like, oh no, what do I do now? Well, today we have my guest, my friend, my colleague. We've known each other for over 10 years. He's joining us. He was with us last week. We got a lot of good reports on what he had talked about. So we figured, come on, we're going to bring him back this week and let him finish up. Dennis Bieber, welcome to Wellness Today. I'm glad you're here. I know that you have a private practice in the greater Danbury area.
I do.
And I also know that you have been in this the social service field for many years. So I know that you have a lot to talk about with us today, but we're going to have to focus in on one subject here. We have a few minutes to talk about the parent-child relationship. Welcome, and I just hand everything over to you.
Well, thank you, Tracy, and thank you for having me back.
It's good to have you.
Yeah, the parent-child relationship, I think, is essential in sort of determining the happiness level of the family. When things are going well, everybody's happy. There's joy, there's excitement. Relationships are strong. When things are going bad, it's like the littlest thing can set off a major altercation.
That's right.
And then all the little things become the area of focus.
Yeah.
And so, the child didn't put their toothpaste away becomes a major confrontation, as opposed to being able to recognize it as, it's really that big of a deal. No. So in my experience, and coming across those kinds of situations, I really focus hard on trying to change that relationship dynamic, knowing how important it is to the mental health of both the parent and the child.
Right. Let me ask you something. When we talk about the toothpaste being left out, many times as a parent, we may look at that toothpaste tube and that's what our focus is, but really there's something behind that. There's more behind that than just the toothpaste being left out. Yeah.
Well, and that toothpaste may represent all the other things that the parent happened to be mad at the child for, or disappointed in the choices they're making, or, whatever the case may be. That toothpaste in that moment may represent something that really is nothing more than what it needs to be, which is child forgot to put the toothpaste away.
Right.
And so, again, kind of changing the dynamic in the relationship. A lot of the work I do is play therapy. And I think through play therapy, you begin to get the parent and the child to interact on a different level. And when that occurs, they start to relate on a different level. And then all of a sudden, you're in a position where you can start talking about the toothpaste. What does the toothpaste represent? And 9 times out of 10, it's like, well, the toothpaste really isn't that big of a deal.
So you're talking about actual, the child and the parent actual doing some play activity with you. They're playing together, and everybody's guard is down a little bit, I would imagine, and you're able to kind of like see the dynamics within the relationship. How important is play?
Play is essential, especially for young kids.
Yeah.
How do young kids communicate?
Through play. Yeah. How about the parent, though?
Oh,
how often do parents play?
They don't. They don't. Parents aren't allowed to play anymore.
Yeah,
we have to
crazy.
be serious. I think, in my experience, there have been times where you get the parent actually engaging in the play with the child. I've seen parents have more fun than the child, and the child will be looking at me like, I have 20 heads. What are you doing? Who is this person that is here now?
Yeah.
And then encouraging them as part of their plan to find time during the week to play. because it really does. It changes the dynamic in the relationship.
That's good. That's a good idea.
Really, it's really important.
Yeah. How often do parents take the time to play with their child on purpose? At least, and we're not even asking for a lot, at least once a week. And we're not talking about taking them to a baseball game or taking them to their basketball practice. We're talking about actual playing, one-on-one, individual attention, whether it's with one child and one parent or the whole family together. Have you experienced that at all? Because I know that you have inpatient work, not inpatient, outpatient work, but also in-home experience as well. How has your experience been with families that play together as opposed to just simple talk therapy and trying to talk things out?
Honestly, it depends on the family, what's going on. But the majority of the progress that I see is when the families are connecting with each other, when they're playing. The parent-child relationship is such an important indicator in terms of how well the kids are going to do, not only in the home, but at school, with the friendships they have. It all starts, the fulcrum of that whole concept starts with the parent-child relationship. How do you strengthen
it? Yes, it's that foundational piece right there. The family is the foundation of the community, the city, the state, the country. The foundation of everything, it starts with these young children and their caregivers and their parents. I'm thinking about, and you know this, you and I have worked together for a number of years, and I'm thinking about a time when we were in a home working with this fantastic family. It was adult, child. And I remember during this one session we were playing a game, and we were trying to promote, good relationships between the two of them, communication and so on and so forth. And I remember one day we're sitting there playing this game, and they loved it when we came. As a matter of fact, when we weren't there, they would play that game. That we just started something. It was great, and it really improved on their relationship. And I remember one day we're playing this game, all four of us, and I was trying to say something to the adult. I was, something, I don't know, it was something, nothing big, and her and the child are like talking back and forth, and I'm still trying to say something to her. Finally, I looked at you and I said, Dennis, she's not answering me. What's going on here? They're still talking. They're still going back and forth, whatever. You said, that's because they don't need us anymore. They're done. They're done. They don't need us anymore. The back and forth conversation was not a bad conversation. They were conversating back and forth. She was totally tuned into the child. And I'll never forget that. Because we have to be able to notice those things, notice what works. And in that particular family, that relationship was really impacted in a positive manner because of the play aspect.
Well, and I think you said something that's really key, is that the caregiver was in tune to the child. And I think, again, we kind of go back to that place where we have busy lives. People might be working, or they're going to school. They're providing, whatever the family needs, and we're not always in tune to what's going on around us. And so I think if we can figure out a way to purposefully create time, I think it creates more of an opportunity to be in tune to what's going on. And so when we're noticing maybe, the child being a little bit oppositional, or maybe they're a little bit quieter than they normally are, or it's like, where are they? I'm wondering what's going on here. The earlier we intervene and find out what's going on, the less likely it is that there's going to be a bigger issue down the road. And so again, it's kind of that idea of, because we're connected, we're in tune, we know more about what's going on, we're preventing bigger things from happening.
And so many times we find that what happens is there are those little keys, there's those little red flags, there's those little behaviors that we may ignore, we just don't have time, or we may have the child do something else just so that we can get them over here so that we can finish doing this over here, and this over here may be important, but it is good to really pick up on those red flags, because many times we see that by the time the parent notices that there's something drastic going on and they come for help, now they're at their wits' end and they want change immediately. But this dilemma is really a buildup of feelings and emotions and behaviors that have been put in place that have not been addressed. So things do not change overnight. We know that.
No, they don't change
They don't
overnight.
change overnight.
I think that's hard sometimes for parents, especially when professionals become involved. I think the expectation is that there's going to be this miraculous transformation, and everything is going to be better, or our work together, having parents say to us, well, how long is it going to take for you to fix our child?
Right. Hear that a lot.
Yeah, hear that a lot. And, sort of my response is, well, what do you think needs to be done to help your child and you get better connected? Because again, 9 times out of 10, the intervention, even though the child might be my client for, technical purposes, the family's the client. The caregiver is essential in determining positive outcomes. If the caregiver's not on board to the intervention, then the likelihood of it being successful is pretty slim.
Yeah.
It's pretty slim.
Yeah.
But the other thing that comes to mind with parent-child relationship issues are the risk factors.
Okay.
Of it could be parental risk factors, mental illness, substance abuse, domestic violence, poverty, cultural challenges.
Yeah.
That really impact the parent-child relationship
Yeah.
and their ability to connect.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, taking those risk factors into consideration, what would you say are some of the protective factors that you see? What are some of the protective factors that may be present that parents just don't realize, they don't recognize? How can you help parents to recognize those positive influences that are out there that may be in the home even? What are some of those protective factors that you can think of?
I think protective factors, family, extended family.
Okay.
I think the church or religious institutions that people are connected to are super huge and super supportive. I like to think in terms of more natural support sometimes, as opposed to professionals, especially when it comes to cultural or religious beliefs. Sometimes there's this stigma against professionals, therapists, social workers becoming involved. It really should be more of the family taking care of itself. It's kind of frowned upon for outsiders to be coming in and doing the therapy or counseling or whatever the case may be, albeit I think it's very helpful.
Right.
I think natural supports are sometimes super important, especially when it comes to long-term outcomes, being successful.
Yes. So what do you say to this parent that may be mandated to go to an agency or go to an outpatient therapist, where their culture is their thought patterns are totally the opposite of seeking out a professional, but here they are. They're mandated. They're trying to follow what's been placed before them. What do you say to those parents that come to you and say, look, what goes on in our house stays in our house. I don't appreciate this. I'm here involuntarily. How can you kind of help this parent to buy into the services that are provided out in the community, as opposed to just kind of like taking what they're saying at face value and turning them away?
Well, I think it's sort of a kind of a parallel process. So we're talking about parent-child relationship. This now becomes something more of a provider-parent relationship.
Okay.
And so I see it as an opportunity to really connect with the parent, to model for them, to give them a corrective experience in terms of the fact that sometimes providers can be counterproductive. Sometimes they can be very helpful.
Okay.
Sometimes they can be sort of the influence that helps to turn the corner. Right. I typically don't work in a mindset of I want you to do what I tell you to do.
Right.
Because I really believe that most people kind of already at some level know what they need to do.
Right.
They just need somebody to kind of help clear away the barriers and the things that are blocking them from being able to get to where they need to go.
Right.
I never try to convince somebody to do something they don't want to do. But I think there's an opportunity for somebody who is seemingly resistant for whatever reason to engaging in services. I always believe there's a way.
Yeah.
I always believe there's a way.
How about the children that are living in homes where the parents are separated or divorced? There are challenges that take place in that situation as well. How does that impact the relationships in your experience? I don't know if you can give a couple of examples. Sometimes maybe the parents are very they have an amicable arrangement to where they get along fine in co-parenting, but sometimes because the divorce happened because of some sort of conflict, now that the residual effects are, in the home now, and now the child is really, not only do the parents not get along, but now the parents are not living together, and their parents are, for lack of a better term, at each other's throats. How do you address that issue? How do we help those parents that are struggling in that area?
My suggestion to those parents is to almost view the relationship as more businesslike.
Okay.
With the idea that the shareholders are the children.
Okay.
What parents do, whether they're divorced or they're together, or if there's a parent-grandparent combo that's raising a child, whatever they do, whatever they decide, impacts the kids directly.
Right.
Either in a positive or a negative way. I oftentimes have parents who, one is the weekday caregiver,
right,
and one is the weekend caregiver. Well, very consistently, the weekday caregiver complains about the lack of structure, discipline, and so on that the weekend caregiver provides. And often resulting in a day or two transition back into a weekday routine that is very problematic and struggling.
Right.
I do everything that I possibly can to try and engage both parents,
right,
to help them to understand and to see the challenges and the successes that each has.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not doable to do co-parenting sessions, just for emotional and sometimes physical safety issues. But I think, multi-parent engagement is really important. I think it's important to set limits and boundaries with the parents in terms of, what the purpose of the discussion is to be. Sometimes, one parent is looking for dirt on the other parent.
right,
So they come in with that intention of trying to gather, information that is going to be, helpful to them for their case. Absolutely not. It's not productive.
right.
And again, just kind of always trying to keep it focused on
Keeping that focus.
on the kids
Yeah.
and what's in their best interest.
Another relationship that comes to mind right now is the relationship between two adults, the adult parent and the adult daughter or son. There are times when there are challenges within those relationships as well. There are many challenges. It could be on an individual level, the parent and the adult child. It could be there could be a conflict with the grandparents and the child and their spouse and their children. What are your experience with, or I know that we could talk all day about this, but if does anything come to mind in relation to adults that you have worked with who have had conflictual relationships with their parents and they want to mend those relationships? Because we were talking about how that foundational level relationship between the parent and child is so crucial for lifelong success and for the success of their relationship. But there are times when there are experiences as children that roll over into adulthood, and it creates such a conflict within that parent-child relationship. What are some of your experiences with that, if you could think of something that may help our viewers out here?
You know, I think it's being open to the idea of healing and having a corrective experience.
Okay.
And that as adults, you know, there are some people who do have unresolved conflict, unresolved anger, unresolved hurt toward their adult parents.
Okay.
Which, you know, kind of leading it back to, you know, sort of a generational track.
Yes.
Can sort of impact kids.
Yes.
Yes.
That was going to be my question.
Or recreate a particular scenario and pattern that once existed.
Right.
You know, I've heard so many parents say, you know, I swore I would never do that to my kids what my mom did to me.
Right.
And then they have that epiphany. Oh my gosh, I just did exactly what I said I wasn't going to do.
Right.
And so then it's really taking advantage of those opportunities to jump into a conversation, which is, well, tell me more about your mom.
Right.
Mom.
Right.
You know, and if there's any possibility to sort of find a way to get them to connect, to at least begin having dialogue around what some of those old things were.
That's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm thinking of the children and their parents, and then you have the next generation, the first generation, the grandparents, and how when everyone is on the same page and there's a balance there, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And just because there was a conflictual relationship between mother and grandmother as mom was growing up, doesn't mean that relationships cannot be repaired.
Absolutely, they can.
Does not mean that at all. At all. I think that one of the things that we have to remember as parents is that our children, as they're growing up, they're watching everything that we're doing, even if they're not watching with their eyes, they're watching, you know.
I once had somebody tell me that our kids watch us like they watch TV.
That could be refreshing and it could be scary, huh?
It can be very scary,
Yeah.
you know, because how many times do parents have conversations for, you know, that are adult conversations, and they think, oh well, you know, they're watching TV, they don't hear what's going on.
They're not paying any attention. Yeah.
Man, that kid can sit there and probably recite the whole darn conversation.
Yes.
And if we're saying things that are scary or terrifying, that, you know, that kids shouldn't be exposed to, you know, as parents, that's something we've got to be aware of.
You're absolutely right. Which brings to my mind, communication is so key. How can parents promote effective communication within their homes as they are bringing up their children, you know?
Well, and what are we doing for our children by doing that? We're modeling pro-social behavior.
Yeah.
We're modeling conflict resolution skills.
Yeah.
We're modeling how to make, you know, positive connections with others.
Yeah.
And by having that strong parent-child bond, that relationship, that's the path to what we're trying to accomplish.
Yes. And, you know, I just have to go back to the whole play piece. And it doesn't have to be necessarily play therapy, but, you know, we have a couple minutes left here, and I just want to really bring home that play piece. It's so important. As adults, we forget that we can play. We forget that we can, you know, as long as we have our limbs and our activities, we forget that we can throw a ball. We can simply take a balloon and just hit it back and forth, and the laughs that come out of that, you know. We can simply turn off the TV and the video games and sit down and play, you know, Monopoly and Life, those old-fashioned box games. They're so fun. So fun.
And so important. And it's not the game that's important. It's the connection in the relationship that is defining. So I, you know, work with a lot of families, and I'll say, you know what? One of the most therapeutic things you can do, go play Uno together.
Oh,
and they look at me
I
like,
love Uno.
20 heads, what are you talking about? How is that therapeutic?
Right.
I said, the Uno game is just the game.
Yeah.
It's the interaction that's therapeutic.
That's right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, we watch TV together. Well, okay, that's maybe a common, you know, interest,
Right.
but it's really not a relationship connecting
Right.
or defining activity.
How about the family dinner?
Super
What's your
important.
thoughts on that one?
Super important.
It's so hard these days. I know we talk about this all the
Absolutely.
time.
Absolutely.
But somebody out there is hearing us talk right now, and they're thinking of, you know what, we don't eat together, but maybe we can eat together 3 times this week. If we just try once this week. Yeah. Family dinner.
Just sit down. I mean, that's where a lot of communication happens.
Yeah.
A lot of connecting happens. You know, a lot of families have instituted rules of no electronics, no phones, no, you know, at the table.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
And
know
that's
what?
that, right?
Sometimes people don't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah.
So again, as the parents, I think it's up to us to model and create those opportunities.
Yes. Yes. Dennis, thank you so much. This has been a really good discussion. I think that you've planted seeds in the minds of parents out there, just things that we haven't thought about in a long time, you know. Just by us talking, I'm sure that somebody heard something that will really help them to kind of like to change the way that they do things within the home, one step at a time. What's your slogan?
Progress, not perfection.
That's it. That's it. I just want to thank our viewers today. Thank you very much for being with us. And most of all, I want to thank my guest, our guest, Dennis Bieber, for joining us today. We've had a great time. This is my buddy here, my pal, and we're just on a great adventure here. And if you need to contact Dennis to find out more information, his information will be on the screen. We'll see you next time.
I don't know why they did that.
I must have talked to